You hungry? Well, this is David Tulis, and I'm always hungry because I don't eat breakfast usually, or I eat a very light breakfast before coming in to meet with you, my listener, here at 92.7 and 95.3 HD4. I don't eat a lot because I want my circulatory system to register that the top of the being in the bean is the place to be, not in the midsection where the digestion ordinarily would be taking place if I had a full breakfast, which my body ordinarily yearns for in the morning. You know, it is breakfast. You're breaking the fast, and your morning meal is really the most important one. And I think a lot of Americans are right to have a big breakfast: eggs, bacon, bread, coffee, and the like. That's just I love that. I don't generally get to do that, but I eat lunch right after my program here on Nooga Radio, and so I'm hungry right now. When I ask that question, are you? I want you to just think for a second of where we could go to eat. Where should you, my listener, and I go to eat now? If you want to make a recommendation about that, you can be free to call me at 800-8949. That's 800-8949. And what I'd like to hear about are your favorite locally owned restaurant, because we are, after all, the loco-centric, Nooga-centric multimedia platform. That is what I do here. I've been, since I was an editor at the Times Free Press, been defending the whole idea of local economy and Nooga-centrism. And I like to suggest to people, if I have a moment of courage, you know, a moment where I'm preening myself, to suggest that I'm a Dr. Nooga-centric, Professor Nooga-centric. In other words, all thing centering on Chattanooga, the center of the universe, right? The existential center, as it were, for people who happen in God's providence to be in time and space here, right, here and now. And so we argue for local restaurants, local shops, local suppliers, trying to give them a leg up against the national competition on these publicly traded behemoths and combines that are dotting the American landscape and have done very well on using the economy of scale and taking advantage of of the free market. They are there, many of them, by virtue of simple genius, and we're not at all condemning that they're there and that they're so large. But often, though, we have largesse and size and scale thanks to intervention in the marketplace and easy capital. Easy capital meaning free money, paper money, of the kind that Grandma Yellen drones over. So let me know, 800-8949, 800-8949, if you want to tell me something about a favorite restaurant locally, especially if it's a local shop. Now, I mentioned this whole question about appetite, and you can interrupt me, 800-8949, 800-8949, because you and I are going to join Andy Burke, the mayor, for lunch today. And we're going to go to a restaurant that Andy, who is Mayor Burke, is very, very loquacious, very well-spoken man. He is the man who knows how to say things. He knows how to say things, and has a winning way about him. Very professional, very earnest. If you remember his presentations during the mayoral campaign, he's very highly polished, and yet not so polished that he seems to drone on. Right? He's not that perfect, and so the imperfections, the humanity, if you will, that show through his discourse is all very winning. And so here we can have lunch with Andy Burke, and we'll even invite him. Okay, I don't think that would offend the sinecure rules of the office or that, yeah, is it sinecure? No, that's not the word I'm looking for. It's there's a legal term where the inurement. It doesn't violate the inurement rules of City Hall that forbid you from taking favors from people, right? That's what that's involved, and they may be pretty loose anyway. But we can take Andy Burke to lunch, and we're going to go to the restaurant he recommends, and it is the restaurant that has no menu and a single fare. So you come in, and that's why you go, because you don't have to make any decisions. You don't have to figure out what your budget is. You just go in, and you're going to pay the same as everybody else. You're going to pay the same $9.95 meal. everybody gets the same, and you can't choose really between Coke and sweet iced tea or non-sweetened iced tea, because that's really not what that restaurant's about. Its fame, its glory, is that it is an equal restaurant. It is a neutral restaurant, and the reason I bring this up and we should celebrate is because today the net neutrality rules that are the inspiration for this dive, right? This greasy spoon, are going to be done away with from Chairman Ajit Pai at the Federal Communications Commission, who's going to end the program brought upon us by the noble President Obama, called net neutrality. And the whole discussion about net neutrality seems there is a kind of otherworldliness about much of the discourse in defense of it, which is a defense against the pricing scheme of the free market, right? What we have with Chairman Pai's proposal is a free market where, get this, there's a menu in the restaurant. There are dollar items at the bottom. And then as you go up through the chain of offerings, all beautifully presented on glowing screens for you, you go to the high-end items, which would be, effectively the $20 lunch. 19 bucks and some change. That's your lunch. And what we have now, though, with Andy at lunch, is, and this is the restaurant Andy likes, right? In fact, he joined other mayors recently in endorsing this idea of a restaurant, and of course, he also did it endorsing net neutrality. He opposed the repeal of submitting the FCC's program under the 1930s statute, which is what President Obama did. President Obama wanted to go back to the 1930s and regulate the internet as a utility. And now we're not gonna pretend that the internet is under the federal government, right? The internet, get this, is bigger than the United States. The United States is not bigger than it. It is bigger than the United States. And ending this program effectively puts the one size fits all restaurant out of business. But in the restaurant here, we're having lunch, and we have the advantage of not having people buy more than we do, right? And we don't have the disadvantage of people buying less than we do. The people who come in who are poor, who eat from the dollar menu and have the small Coke, right? We don't have to bear with them. They're kind of bothersome people. They got too many kids, and they have old clothes on, and they're buying from the dollar menu. And you and Andy and I, we're going to be probably on the higher end of things. And that's in a real restaurant. But here in this restaurant, we don't have to worry about that, right? Because we all have to pay the same amount. So we either go out hungry, or we pay, the same amount, the $19 item. We all have to pay the same amount. But the fact that there's a menu, that's shameful, because that suggests discrimination. That suggests that some people can't have things on the menu, right? If you have a menu, some people won't be able to afford more. Some people can only afford less, and so we don't really want to have the reminder that there are low-income people. We don't want to have the reminder on our restaurant menu that there are higher-income people who don't worry about a $40 lunch for two. They just don't worry about it, and as rightly they should. They've got important things to think about, and they don't price the lunch out. They don't ask oh, can I have this for only that? They don't dicker with the waitress on the menu and ask if the restaurant's going to charge for the cheese, right, in the hamburger. They're not going to ask that question. I've done that before, and I realize it's kind of petty. But in the one price fits all restaurant, where we have also the advantage of not having to be bothered by color schemes, we have everything in beige. Everything is in beige, and even the paintings on the wall are of desert scenes with mildly colored lizards and cacti, and very, very pale blue sky. The other kind of sky that you have naturally. And so it's a restaurant which doesn't want to stand out. It's a very neutral restaurant, very, very neutral. And the benefit of that restaurant is you don't have to worry about price. Price is not a consideration. Everything is the same price. And so when we hear in the net neutrality story people saying, well, if we get rid of net neutrality, you won't be able to go to certain websites. We'll be having, as they say, Comcast will be censoring your web travels. Well, that's not. These are just ridiculous statements, I'm afraid. That's, you can always go to any website you want to. The question is, can you consume large amounts of bandwidth and not pay more for the joy of having 5 movies coming at you at one time, or 10, right? Or downloading gigantic files back and forth just for fun, which would be perhaps a video game. Well, if you're going to play a video game that takes up a lot of bandwidth, and it does require resources that are not neutral, right? Then I think it's only reasonable, perhaps, right, that you should pay more. So, we can have lunch with Andy in the restaurant, but I think we should probably, finish up and move on, and hope that though the meal is good, think that we could have maybe done better in a place that wasn't neutral, but in fact in a place where there was controversy, where there were highs and lows, where pricing is the way of allocating resources. And that's what we want to always defend here on the David Tulis Show, that pricing allocates resources in the best. And who benefits the most from a real free market? Who or whom? Well, the poor people do. Poor people benefit the most, because in a free market, when you don't have interventions by the good people in Washington or Nashville, you have high price items that are maybe slower, not as colorful, not as fast. And then you have, those are the low price items. And then you have high price items that are very demanding. They take a lot of natural resources to produce. And so naturally you pay more for them. And if you want to have it in half the time, you have to pay an extra $10 tip, right? That's all fair, that if you want your lunch quickly because you're in a hurry, you pay a tip, right? You pay a premium to get ahead of the other people. And of course, the other people don't know that, but you've paid more and you're getting that thing up front. So that's the way the world works. And if you can't do that, right? If you can't have tips, if you can't have bribes, if you can't pay more for something, or avoid high costs and have a slower service, maybe it takes you longer to get your hamburger and your drink. You just accept it, right? You just accept that you paid for less, and it may not be as tasty, may not be as big, may not have as much mustard on it or as many pickles as the other, but you accept that because that's the lower end item. But we don't want to have that on the internet. Somehow we think that the internet is free from the marketplace, right? That the requirements of human nature, which is the marketplace, don't apply there. I mean, it's almost somehow the fact we have the internet has made people think no longer in human beings in human form, but just somehow we're just all digits. Why every human being is a plus or a minus, and somehow there's this amoral venue in which they all interact on the internet. Well, no, people are human beings, and pricing does matter. Pricing does, and we don't want to have, what we don't want on the internet is the Federal Reserve, right? Mrs. Yellen, Grandma Yellen, Dr. Yellen, no doubt. She's droning on about nominal raising these nominal intrabank loan rates to control the economy. Well, there you have a disaster in the making. That is to say, the national disaster that is just ahead, and that is the collapse in confidence in her paper dollar. What's wrong? Well, there's no pricing mechanism anymore. What do you mean? Well, we've had artificially suppressed rates of interest because of intervention by what has become effectively, as David Stockman said, the controlling power in the national economy. That's the Fed. We've had for 10 years an artificial suppression of the rate of interest. In other words, no pricing in the price of debt. Price of debt, we can't find out what the real price of debt is. And that is because of this artificial low interest rates to goose the economy after the meltdown. Because the meltdown could not have its good effects on the economy and liquidate many parts of the economy with all of its dead wood, we have the same crisis ahead. It's going to come again. Only it's going to be worse because we have a hand on the pedal, if you will. We have other hands on the steering wheel, if you will. The economy can't steer itself. We have these better people than us doing it, and they cannot but avoid disaster. They cannot but avoid it. It will happen soon, and we are all very, very vulnerable for it. And so what we want is the operation of price on the internet. We want to be able to have people to be able to pay more and get more, pay less and get less, right? That helps the poor. Why should poor people have to have special programs for subsidized internet? Where the government suddenly is the good guy. Why not have a real marketplace where they can, without government intervention, just buy what's cheap and be content with that, rather than all of us paying $60 a month? There should be, a real $20 plan for the internet, a real $20 plan. You buy just the internet width you need and save money. Decentralization and deregulation is always good, and Ajit Pai has that in mind. I saw this morning a post online from a very fine young lady named Hannah Cox. She works at the Beacon Center in Nashville, libertarian think tank, but she has a comment about Roy Moore and his defeat yesterday, which really I would say disappointed me. And I want you to hear what she has to say. She's a libertarian, and I think she's a Christian, probably I think she's a homeschool graduate, but her ideas are typical of the thinking in modern evangelicalism. And what it is, well, she shows you how irrelevant Christianity has become. Okay, in her mind, Christianity is irrelevant. It belongs only between your ears. It cannot have an effect on law. It cannot have an effect on courts, on how the law operates through government into society and into culture. She says, "So glad Alabama did not vote Roy Moore in, even aside from the pedophile accusations. He was a theocrat, opportunistic, showboat, and his existence is an embarrassment to not only the Republican Party, but anyone who calls themselves a Christian." Okay, so his Christianity is an embarrassment. Though those who use God's name to force others to live as they see fit through government mandate act against the very nature of God, she says, free will in parentheses. They also endanger our freedom of religion. This is David Tulis. Caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
I just want to point out real quick the absolute ridiculousness in the media with Roy Moore. I had people from legitimate media outlets calling Roy Moore a pedophile or a child molester when there were no charges pressed against him, as far as I know, and he was not convicted of any crime. It was obvious slander, and I'm expecting lawsuits to come out a little bit later. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Right. Thanks a lot. Good point. To call him a pedophile, to call him a child molester is simply slander. It's just a slander. And here, though, she's this young woman, a Christian, is repeating them. She says, "Those who use God," this is the part I really like. "Those who use God's name to force others to live as they see fit through government mandate act against the very nature of God." And then she has in parentheses free will, right? Because there's free will, we can't have God's law. That's what she's saying. They also, she goes on to say, endanger our freedom of religion. And then she explains, when you threaten someone else's freedom of religion, you set legal precedent and open doors for others to do the same thing to you. I hope this is the last I hear of that dangerous lunatic. It's a very uncharitable comment, and I think it's really beneath her to make it. I think it is a kind of oral ejaculation, not thought well through, because what she's saying is that Christianity is in fact private. Christianity matters only between your ears, right? You can have all the religion you want. You can pack your gut full of religion, Bible books, Bibles, Sunday school, curricula and the like, sermon audio. You can do all that you want. Just don't make it touch anybody else. Just don't make it touch the law, right? Because we know the law is coercive. And I'd say that our own analysis here on the David Tulis Show is that indeed the law is coercive, and that's why we need to have many fewer of them, especially man-made laws such as Tennessee codes, annotated, and U.S. codes. She says that Christianity is a private affair, and you really shouldn't even think about acting on it. Somehow, the fact that Roy Moore, as a principled Christian who insists on acknowledging the sovereignty of God in the law, that somehow this is oppressive. She's sharing very much in the egalitarian humanistic argument made against Christianity, which is the tenor of which is to insist that you can't have God's law. You really have to be antinomian, which is to say anti-law. You can take God, fine, but remember, it's all about grace. There is no law in Christianity. It's all about grace. It's all about forgiveness. It's all about caring for other people. It's all about private charity. It's all about prayer life, not committing adultery, not committing private sins. It is those things for sure. But Roy Moore, I think, has been such an offense to the people, even Christians, because he declares that God is sovereign. He is sovereign over all things, and he has to be acknowledged. His will has to be acknowledged, and his word has to be acknowledged. And of course, American law, in many ways, does acknowledge God and his principles. As I pointed out, we can have a major reform in horrific abuses of the poor in Hamilton County if we just honored the law of God out of Deuteronomy 19, which is captured in the Tennessee Code in what is known as the mens rea statute, the guilty conscience statute. That statute is widely ignored by all of our judges. If it were honored by our judges, we would solve our jail crowding problem, and we would solve the continuing abuse, the pathological abuse of the poor by the law enforcement community here in Hamilton County. The law does matter. All law is a moral claim of somebody's morals. Now, the question is that morality going to be godly revealed in Scripture, or is it going to be some private power-oriented morality enforced upon society through the statute and through police organizations? David Tulis, I've got some important announcements. Hang on.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3.